Hey everybody! So today I have a special interview with Jack Askew, and he is another ESL teacher. He's actually from Britain, and I thought you guys would enjoy learning his perspective about what it's like to learn English with British versus American English. We will talk about some cultural aspects between Britain and America, and also the language differences. So I hope this is something that you will enjoy, and I will link Jack's channel and anything we mention about his channel or website. I will link it in the description. So let's get started. So thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
Yeah, of course.
You're from Britain, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And you're an ESL teacher. So can you tell me a little bit about your experience and also where you live now?
Yeah, sure. So I got into teaching in 2008 because I had just met a girl in
Okay.
South America and I needed somewhere or something to do that I could do anywhere. So I looked into it and I found an online teaching job, started teaching or started to give conversational English lessons,
Okay.
fell in love with it. And then my wife and I moved to Spain. We got married, moved to Spain. I taught in language schools in Spain, firstly in Bilbao and then Valencia.
I've been to Bilbao.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
What did you think of it?
I only went there to visit, but I was living in San Sebastian for
Ah, okay.
3 months
Lovely.
in
You,
2003.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to San Sebastian a few times from
hmm
Bilbao on the train. It's a lot of fun on that beach.
It is. It is a lot of fun and beautiful, like you said.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I taught in a couple of language schools there. Then I
Okay.
taught in Valencia too. And then since 2011, I've been teaching online. So, firstly, I was given one-to-one lessons, and now I have a training program, online training program for English learners.
Okay.
And yeah, live in Asheville, North Carolina.
How did you end up there?
So, my wife chose it. We wanted to move to either the UK or America. I couldn't think of a specific place in the UK that I wanted to go to. Whereas we had a short list of New York,
Mm-hmm.
Austin, Portland, and also Asheville. Asheville isn't well known, but my wife went to UGA in Georgia. So she had visited here. She looked on forums and said, "We're looking for a place that has a great community, is liberal, good food, outdoor adventures," and everyone just said, "Go to Asheville."
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I never heard of it before either until you. So,
Yeah, it's booming.
oh, and is your wife from the US or I know you said you met her in South America, but is she
Yeah,
from here or?
yeah, she's from Connecticut.
Okay, okay. All right, so I want to ask some questions for English language learners. And I think you will have a great opinion to share since you are from Britain, but you're living in the United States. I think it's a unique opportunity for English language learners to hear from someone like you. So, my first question is, what's your opinion for English language learners on learning British English versus American English?
Yeah, it's people get very people are very opinionated about this. They have very
Mm-hmm.
strong opinions. You know, they say things like, "Oh, you have to learn American English because it's the language or the type of English that's used in business." People say you have to learn British English because it's the original. I mean, there are two things to think about. Firstly, what are you going to use your English for and who you're going to use it with? So a lot of people in Europe learn British because of the proximity. Um, People in South Korea learn American English because of the business. Um, but also, you know, I think it's a good idea if you are anxious about this whole question,
Mm-hmm.
which one to learn, just learn both and enjoy it. And also consider that there is also Australian English. There is the English as a lingua franca, the type of English that English learners or non-native speakers use to communicate with each other. And that's becoming more prominent. And yeah, I just think take all the pressure off and just enjoy. Another thing to think about as well is which culture do you prefer? If you're really into all things American, then you're naturally going to
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Can you tell me the difference between British English and American English? Is there such a huge difference anyway?
I think there is. I mean, it's all by a certain degree. As a Brit, as someone from the UK, I could, growing up, without the huge exposure, I could understand what Americans were saying. But there are certain things that make it different. The spelling, pronunciation, obviously, too. And I think where it really is different is with idioms and expression, especially based around things like sport. So Americans will have lots of baseball idioms. British English has cricket idioms. Um, but the more as someone who's lived here for a while, American English just sounds normal to me now, and it didn't take that long for that to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I thought it was going to be, I mean, like you said, idioms. That's something that I didn't first think of. I just thought of vocabulary in general, like trousers versus pants or jeans or whatever. So,
Yeah. What's interesting, the town where I'm from, we call trousers pants. That's like a very
rare.
rare thing. No, the vocabulary is big. Lots of different differences there. A lot of Brits and Americans already know those differences, right? They know car park.
No.
Okay, if you had to guess what it was.
Car park?
Yeah,
Like a parking lot?
exactly.
Okay.
So a lot of the time you understand the difference. You don't know.
Yes,
You
exactly.
can get it from the context.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's true too because I speak Spanish as a second language, and it's interesting, like you said, it's like this big controversial thing. What type of Spanish or what type of English should I learn? But then when you actually experience it, it's not a big deal. When you become fluent enough, it's really not a big deal.
Yeah, and then you'll reach a stage where you know the difference between the two.
Yeah, because when I went to Spain, prior to going to Spain, most of my exposure was in Mexico. So I spoke more of a Mexican Spanish, although I learned some Spanish like from Spain just in the classroom. But everyone was like, "Don't go to Spain. You're going to be so confused." And I got there, I was fine. I'm like, it's not a big deal. So, another question about British English. I saw this comment on YouTube, and this guy was saying that he lived in Britain. I don't know where he lived. I don't know if he mentioned exactly where, but he said that the British English where he was living was so hard to understand. And I was wondering if you think that it's like a different vernacular. Like, are there different areas in Britain that might be more difficult to understand than other areas?
Yeah, definitely. If we talk about the UK,
Mm-hmm.
think of Glasgow, Scotland.
Right.
That can be very, very difficult. The accent, the pronunciation as a whole, use of vocabulary, the slang terms as well. So the accent can change in very small distances. I'm from a town called Preston. It's 30 minutes away from Manchester. Now, to me, those accents are very different. To a non-native speaker, it might be very similar. Liverpool is very close by as well, and that gets different too. It's Liverpool Scouse accent is very different to Manchester, but they're only 20, 30 minutes away. An area which is probably the easiest to understand, and I think it's the closest to receive pronunciation. I might be wrong here, but it's around the Leicester area. North of London, south of Manchester. in the middle. That's probably the easiest place to understand. The way, if you go somewhere where it's a little bit more difficult, then
Challenging yourself.
we speak with people and don't have that strong accent. It's, you think this is
It's easy. Yep. Yeah. Exactly. That's very true. Good advice, Jack. So I know you did some videos on the difference between British and American culture.
Yep.
So I actually wanted to ask you, what do you think the Brits and Americans have in common?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I was thinking about this. The American institutions mainly came from the British influence. Politics, religion to a degree, but then you also have those changes from the revolution and just years of history, which leads different cultures into different places. But I always feel like there is some kind of connection between Brits and Americans, and let's talk about that special relationship between the two. And obviously, the language is such a huge part of that. There are definitely big differences in certain aspects, but I think on the whole, people are friendly. When I went traveling in South America and I met Americans, it was instant, because the language barrier wasn't there, and everyone's interested in the differences between American and British English and the cultures. There's always something to talk about and connect with.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny you brought up history because for a while, I taught and co-taught 7th grade language arts and social studies. And in 7th grade, we do have to learn about the American Revolution. And I was always curious, how did they teach it in Britain? Do you remember? They don't teach it?
Yeah, it's not something that we delve into. I mean, I did from my own personal learning, but it's not taught in schools.
Okay, that's so interesting. I was wondering if, or even if they talk about like colonizing or anything.
The main thing we focused on was the Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
The causes for it and the agricultural revolution before that.
Yeah.
We didn't really go into colonization.
Okay.
It might be different now. A lot of the time, the national country will teach history.
Of course, yeah.
In America, the revolution is
A big deal. Yeah.
founding fathers. It's drilled into America.
Yeah, it is.
But then in the UK, it's more about the Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
And how Britain changed the world through industry.
Okay, yeah. So that's why I was curious, though, actually, because I wanted to know the other perspective. I was curious how they would, talk about it from the British side. So,
Yeah. No, we don't.
okay. That's so funny. All right. So that actually wraps up most of my questions, but I would love to hear if you have any other comments or advice for English language learners, anything that comes to your mind.
Yeah, I think something that's important is I've been living here for 6 years now. As I say, American English now just sounds normal to me
Mm-hmm.
because I've put myself in an environment and I'm using language here and connecting with people. And I think it just shows that if you create the right environment, then you're going to internalize vocabulary, structures, accents, everything else. An English learner who maybe doesn't have that opportunity to go abroad, to go to an English-speaking country, you can still create your own environment by watching things, listening to things, just immersing yourself in the language and culture online by watching videos like these, by downloading podcasts, watching the news in English, reading books, etc. And it's amazing how much you can internalize.
Definitely. I totally agree with you and how much technology has changed our world in that aspect. When I was learning Spanish, I had no access, like the internet wasn't such a huge, vast, array of things back then. I couldn't just listen to some podcast in Spanish or listen to some YouTube video. So yes, it's the same. Like that's such a great opportunity for any language learner, whether it's English or other languages. So
Yeah,
take advantage of what you have available to you.
definitely. It's just getting easier and easier
It is.
to do that.
It really is. It's amazing. And I love it, and that's part of this job too. Teaching online. It's just the opportunities are so vast. So
They are. Yeah, I love it.
I know.
Yeah.
So it was nice to meet you, and thank you so much for this interview.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been good fun. I like your sheep. Is that a sheep or?
It's like a alpaca.
Ah, okay, very cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
That's weird.